What's up? It's been a while since I've recorded something on myself, but there's something I've been wanting to talk about. Nothing personal or anything like that. Just listen to other pods. Um, some discussions that I just didn't want to talk about on Twitter or all that. I'm not a big Twitter guy these days. Anyone who knows me kind of knows that I really kind of just keep to myself as of late. I'm going to give it a few minutes because I just want to see how it's going here, how it's looking. Since it's just be me about myself. So yeah, that's kind of nervous. Give me a few seconds just to get set before I dive in because yeah, I mean not much has been going on. I'm not talking about CM Punk. That's not what this is. Even though CM Punk once said all he ever needed was a microphone. He didn't need anything else. That's all he needed was just that microphone when Vince McMahon was trying to give him the plane, the movie deals, this and all that. And there's nothing extra going on here. There's no images, there's no intros, no fancy shit. It's just me talking, me on the mic. And yeah, my thoughts. Anyone who knows me kind of knows I'm a opinionated individual. So I thought I kind of share what I've been thinking about lately, kind of in the last week or so. I kind of did some research. So if you see me looking at my phone, it's me looking at what I was writing down the past 24 hours to get ready for this pod because I don't really like to come in prepared. Anyone who watched White Noise or BRP kind of knows I like to be informed on what I'm talking about. I don't like to be one of those people who talks out of their ass. That's kind of one of the problems with a lot of podcasters who just say shit to say shit or didn't do the research prior. Yeah, just give me a second. I kind of got my coffee here as well. I got the chat on the side, so if you want to say something, that's dope. But like I said, just give me one more minute because it's looking good so far. Like I said, it's weird. Not weird being the only screen, but just being that weird being the only one that's talking. I did this 2 times, 2.5 years ago, when Banks and I were on different schedules at the time. Then we were able to get back on the same schedule shortly after that. But I went about an hour each time. I don't know how I did that. So I don't know how long I'm going to go here. I got a lot to say on what I'm going to talk about. And if I go on a different tangents or forget to circle back to my main topic, that's just how I talk. Anyone who knows me knows I kind of like spaz out sometimes because I can go motor mouth. A lot to say because a lot of thoughts just always kind of stay in my head. But yeah, it's weird. Kind of nervous. That's the thing these days. Since I haven't been doing this consistently the last 5 months, I've been nervous. Banks and I have recorded 2 times because one episode doesn't count because it wasn't able to be put out there. And I've recorded with Keeks 2-3 times. And I get nervous now because I'm not doing it every week. It's not a routine anymore. So I feel out of practice. But yeah, so let me get started. So I've been listening to a podcast the last few weeks called We Want Winners. It's part of the BSPN YouTube, Bay Area Sports Network. And We Want Winners is a 49er-centric podcast hosted by Double G and Rod. Shout out to those guys. They're amazing. So if you're a 49ers fan, I highly recommend you check that out. Great analysis. Not afraid to critique the Niners as well as give them praise. And that's kind of my favorite type of analysis. I don't want to be too Homer-centric when it comes to the things I'm interested in. You got to critique stuff when it's bad, but you also got to praise when it's worthy of it. So they also got some great other shows too, Thompson and Clark, The Death Lineup. So I definitely recommend you check out BSPN on YouTube and on audio as well. But YouTube is kind of where we're all trying to get to these days, just because it's where we can see who we're listening to. But they had brought up Bill Simmons's conversation point on a podcast he had a few weeks ago about the mediocrity of quarterback play this year, how there are a lot of bad quarterbacks. excuse me, the Tyson Bajents, Tommy DeVito's, you know, is it Dorian Thompson Robinson? No offense to, Browns fans that I know online. I know PJ Walker because he had a decent showing against us, but there have been a lot of bad quarterback play this year. And Double G had brought up a point about how the black quarterbacks, with the exception of CJ Stroud, have had ups and downs. Justin Fields, Bryce Young, Josh Dobbs has kind of shown out at times. And he had said that a veteran black quarterback, and this was a great point, by the way, should kind of mentor these guys in the offseason, like Colin Kaepernick. And I think that's something he'd be great at if he could kind of mentor these guys. I think Mike Vick would be a great guy as well, Cam Newton. Anyone in the last 15 years of quarterback play would be perfect to mentor. Bryce Young, Josh Dobbs, all these guys that are currently in the league right now and will be coming into the league. And that's also what I'll be talking about, the guys coming in as well, the guys who haven't been looking too well right now. And you think about that, like, it's tough because black quarterbacks are always picked apart unfairly, in my opinion, because they don't have the strong arm yet. They're so raw when it comes to reading the defense. And that's fair and unfair because the guys that kill it on Saturdays always do have a hard time killing it on Sundays. It's tough to make that transition for a lot of the pros too, and a lot of the white guys as well, is what I'm saying. Because what I'm about to say, I don't want it to be misconstrued as coded language of here's what these guys need to do, because it's not that way at all. Trust me. Because a lot of the guys that are doing mid jobs right now are Josh Allen, who's got a lot of hype, a lot of commercials. Baker Mayfield was the same thing in the 2 years prior to that. But I see what he was talking about. If they had someone who went through the ringer like Kaepernick did, like Cam Newton did, like Michael Vick did, where you come out the gate storming, you have just pure athleticism that no one else can match. You start to develop the quarterback skills later on because you have to add something else to your arsenal. You can't be so one-dimensional like guys can be in college, because half these guys aren't going to make it to the league, maybe more than half. I always forget that statistic about the number of players that actually make it to the NFL from college, but it's so much easier for you to dominate on college, also depending on your conference. But conference realignment these days is so messy where teams from the West are playing teams in the South on a more frequent basis, and that's going to get worse when the Pac-12 kind of fully dissolves and becomes a big 24 at this point, whatever it's going to be. Regardless of that, I think someone like Mike Vick in particular would be the best guy for this job, because he started out as the best runner in the game, and then when he came back from serving his time, he became a better passer. He probably knew how to read defenses better after knowing what it took to get that little bit of success he had in Atlanta, to then once he got to Philadelphia in a better coaching situation than he'd ever been before in Atlanta, with Andy Reid and his offense making him a thrower more than a runner. These guys need to be put in positions to succeed more than to fail. And that's always been my thing, is you set up guys to fail when you start them right away. And that's what I'm about to say, is that Caleb Williams coming into this, this coming year's draft, he shouldn't start wherever he goes. If he goes to New England, he shouldn't start. If he goes to another team, Arizona, he shouldn't start. Sit him down, have him develop with the offense over the course of a few weeks. So by the time it's week 6 or week 7, and if your team's kind of already out of it by then, which you most likely will be if you had a number 1, 2, 3, or 4 pick, why throw this guy out there to the Wolves to get slaughtered? It doesn't make sense. Time and time again, these guys get beat up so early. Their confidence gets fucking shaken because they kill it in college, but they can't win right away in the NFL. That was the whole thing with Trevor Lawrence the first year, was why isn't he, looking good right away. Well, he got put in a shitty situation with Urban Meyer. If you have Urban Meyer as your coach in the NFL, your chance of success is gone based on how he was running things in Jacksonville. So that's a, you know, fair point for Trevor Lawrence to then restart the next year. He got put a better offense, a better coach, and succeeded. It took some time, and you see right now he's kind of getting back to that. But if he had sat the first couple of weeks and then got put in, who knows what it would have looked like. And that's always the thing for me, is that you throw these guys out there right away and they're not going to look good. They don't have an O-line. They don't have weapons. You can see in Carolina, like, again, they traded a lot of their weapons last year. They don't have Christian McCaffrey. They don't have, who was the guy, which receiver they traded the Bears? Was it Moore? They're just not going to look as good as they did in college because they don't have the same weapons. Bryce Young at Alabama, I didn't watch too much of him because I haven't watched that much of college football until this year. He's not going to look like the guy who won national titles, who won Heisman. He's not going to look that good because not just the fact that it's professional speed, but he doesn't have the roster he had. Guys are put in positions to succeed in college where they go, but also in positions to fail. And you can see Caleb Williams this year. He failed because his defense wasn't that good. So he can only do so much on offense to bring this team to 7 wins like he did. Because at the end of the day, it's also a team sport. But when you're the quarterback, you still have to lead your offense out there. And there were times where he looked sloppy and times where he looked good. What Vin just said, again, Zach Wilson was the guy who got thrown to the wolves right away. And there's already a lot of like, is this guy ready coming into the draft anyway? Whenever it's that, you have to sit these guys. I don't care how good they look in college anymore. Cam Newton, that first game he came out, he threw the 400 yards, and it was like, Cam Newton's for real. He looked for real at Auburn. That is true. I'm not saying there are those, small instances where a guy can come out and kill it right away. CJ Stroud is the guy who's doing that this year. And then what's funny is he's breaking the curse of the Ohio State quarterbacks because Terrell Pryor, JT Barrett, Cardell Jones, they've made Braxton Miller a wide receiver, so that doesn't count. Dwayne Haskins, Justin Fields. Again, Justin Fields was picked apart this year by JT O'Sullivan's QB school about this guy isn't ready, he hasn't fully developed, and whose fault's that? The team that picked him and put him in this position, or him for personally not getting better? I think it's more on the team than him, but sometimes these guys probably know, like, hey, I have these bad habits early because look where I'm at. And, the Jets are a dysfunctional organization. That's already a cursed quarterback job, no matter who you are. You're not going to come look at Aaron Rodgers. He got injured on the first drive, and I'm not surprised by that because it's a cursed position. It's more underrated as a cursed job for quarterbacks than the Cleveland Browns is. So you can see why Zach Wilson struggles now. You can see why other guys struggle at the places they're at. And me being a 49ers fan, I know why Brock Purdy is succeeding. He's got Trent Williams on the O-line. He's got Deebo Samuel, who's a playmaker, running, catching, can do it all. Brandon Ayuk, who took the leap within the last 2 seasons after being in the doghouse for the first 1.5 seasons. But last year and this year, he's becoming a legit number 1 threat. George Kittle, top 4 tight end in football. And Kyle Shanahan, an offensive-minded coach who knows that the run game is just as valuable as the passing game, because that's why I left out McCaffrey as that weapon, even though Brock Purdy does succeed by throwing the ball to McCaffrey, as well as the 49ers succeed by making McCaffrey run the ball. But that is the perfect position for a guy like Brock Purdy to come in and succeed right away after sitting the first 7-8 weeks, because it's not all on him. It's not all on him to win right away. We got you this talent. No one should fail in this situation. The reason Trey Lance was traded, to me, he didn't fail. He was just legit the wrong pick. They picked the guy so raw right out the gate that he had no choice but to sit, which is what he did the majority of that first season. He started only 2 games, did a few trick plays, but was being prepped to be the starter of the next season, which was, in my opinion, still not just the right decision, because if Garoppolo takes you to the NFC title game again, regardless of his up and down quarterback play. Again, he's handsome Jimmy, trick or treat. You ride the roller coaster with Jimmy Garoppolo, but he's still a better option than this guy who played barely, what, 14 games in college, if I'm not mistaken, and who still needs to sit, still needs to know what it takes to play at the highest level, considering he was already at a small school, North Dakota State. You don't play in the top division, you don't play against the top conferences. I'm always biased of that, of where did this guy go to school? I'm not saying they have to go to Bama, they have to go to, you know, Clemson, they have to go to the biggest schools possible. But if you're going to beat up even on Division two guys, that's still scare me, and that'll lead to my big Caleb Williams point as I'm get going. This is all just kind of a lot of a setup for that. And Trey Lance just didn't develop correctly this preseason, but I don't put stock into preseason. I haven't put stock in preseason the last 13 years, if I can remember correctly. Even being a 49ers fan, I didn't follow that he lost the job to Sam Darnold. Watching JT O'Sullivan's QB school about the preseason start, it was just a lot of what I said. He's raw, he's not ready. But he got dealt a bad hand. His first start last season is in the rain. That's a wash. Pun not intended, because every quarterback's going to look bad in the rain. Jimmy Garoppolo lost in the rain. Brock Purdy this year lost in the rain against Cleveland, the first loss the 49ers had this year. Quarterbacks are going to look bad in bad conditions, no matter how good you are. The whole Tom Brady plays well in the snow. We all know Tom Brady's different. He's in his league by himself for a reason. But Trey Lance had that miserable game against the Bears, and then he gets injured in his second game against the Seahawks, running the ball up the middle, which he was supposed to do. Everyone shit on Kyle Shanahan for that. I'm like, that's wrong, because the whole point of drafting Trey Lance was to create a second option as a quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't going to be able to do anything other than throw the ball. He couldn't run after his knee injury. He was a decent runner prior to that, but you could tell after the knee injury he wasn't the same mobility-wise. So, these read options, RPOs, QB sneaks, unless they were, just punch it up the middle like Tom Brady does, they weren't going to happen in the 49ers offense. So they drafted Trey Lance to be a runner and a thrower, and he was good as a runner, raw as a thrower. So they thought his strength was just to run him up the middle, big guy, quick, and he, breaks his ankle. He's fucked. So everyone shit on Kyle Shanahan for making the bonehead move of doing what his offense now was designed to do and create options outside of Deebo Samuel running the ball and catching the ball, outside of George Kittle blocking and catching the ball. This is prior to getting McCaffrey, so Elijah Mitchell was looking decent until he's dropped off, and any 49ers fan knows that's been the case. Again, they lost Mostert, in the offseason. So that's why it's tough for these guys to come in if you're not going to play more than 2 games in your first season. You're going to get injured in your second season, and now you're coming in a preseason knowing the guy who just took the team in the NFC title game is already having the job, and you just got to beat out the backup. Maybe you already lost his confidence. Maybe you just wanted out to begin with. I don't blame Trey Lance for wanting out. I just blame the 49ers for picking the wrong guy. They didn't need to start him right away. They didn't need to start him over Brock this year to make it a real competition, because we saw what happened last year with Brock Purdy, and we're seeing it right now. He's still the best guy for the job. Even if he's Brett Favre-ish with his risk-taking, he's still the best guy for the job. And who knows if Trey Lance will ever be something. It's good that he's sitting now with Dak Prescott. That was the best situation, was for him to go to Dallas, learn an offense again, and continue to sit and hopefully get a chance next year to compete for the backup job again. And not saying hope and pray that Dak Prescott gets injured, but that when you see action, you'll be ready for it, because you'll be in an offense with CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard, and who knows what can happen. But it was good that he sat back that first year, with the exception of those 2 bad starts, but they weren't too bad. It's just you have to chalk up everything Trey Lance related to an asterisk in a way. But all these other quarterbacks, Kyler Murray, Bryce Young, and that's the thing. It's the black quarterbacks that get taken first go to these horrible situations. Kyler Murray, I have his stats right here. It's the first time I'm pulling up my phone right now. So Kyler Murray is 25, 3, and 1 with one playoff loss over his seasons up until this season. This is not counting this season stats. 84 passing TDs, 42 interceptions, 13,848 passing yards, and he's been sacked 131 times. This is a guy who's listed at 5'10", weighs 207. So he's coming into the league with the deck stacked against him from a physical standpoint, and this is the most physical sport in the world. And he's playing the toughest job in all of sports. The quarterback position is the toughest job in all sports. No one can debate it otherwise. My grandma said, what about a goaltender in hockey? I'm like, I get what you're saying, but the goaltender just has to stop the puck. The quarterback has to, take it, hits, throw the ball, do all these extra things, keep the play clock in mind, which Brock Purdy always forgets. We waste a timeout every fucking week because he forgets to look at the play clock. But that's Kyler Murray, a guy who went into a system that was designed for him with Cliff Kingsbury, who was also, again, Urban Meyer and Ware. Like, you don't need or want this guy as your head coach. No offense to handsome Cliff Kingsbury, but he was not meant to be an NFL coach. And the deck was already stacked against him, like I said, for being a handsome guy. You can't have a handsome guy be your head coach. Look at the Giants and Gabe Kapler. You can't have a handsome, good-looking guy be the coach of your team. Just that aesthetic throws the vibe off in the room because, I don't know, this guy's too good-looking. Everyone's going to bring up he's so good-looking. And this is the guy telling players what to do and all that. The media makes a bigger thing out of it, but still, it's one of those old-school beliefs that I kind of have in a way, those kind of weird sports, like, I don't like this guy for that reason, or like, teams won't succeed for this reason. But I also wrote down Kyler Murray's rushing stats. So in his first year, he rushed for 544 yards, 4 touchdowns. Second year, 819 yards, 11 touchdowns. And then 423 yards, 5 touchdowns in the third. And then last season, 418 yards and 3 touchdowns. So his rushing's gone up and down throughout the course of his career because black quarterbacks come in looking to use their athleticism right away, because if the play's broken, they can make something out of it. They have the best athletic ability, out of anyone else in the league. We're not going to see, I'm trying to think of a good example. Joe Flacco, when he was playing, break a big run. Matt Ryan, break a big run. They didn't even do that at college for Delaware and Boston College. So anyone who watched Kyler Murray at Oklahoma knew that he can run the ball and throw the ball. That's why these guys get picked high, as they should, because I want that duality. I want that dual threat quarterback. People can say, yeah, we need the big arm. We need a guy who can make all the throws. But you just can't throw deep all the time, especially if you have bad receivers. You just can't rely on your running ability too much. I think Mike Vick kind of said that himself, is that once his athleticism started to go, he had to become more of a thrower. And you can see it with Cam Newton. He got banged up by running the ball too much. Colin Kaepernick got banged up by running the ball. And a lot of these other guys, you can see Lamar Jackson, maybe he's focusing on being more of a thrower, but still, you want to have that in your back pocket of like, use the run when you can. But these guys come out of the gate running the ball because no one's still going to stop them. They're quick runners. They can make these cuts because they got fresh legs compared to like a 33-year-old D lineman. So there's still some of that Saturday magic they're able to translate to Sundays, but still it starts to, dissipate slowly and slowly over the course of their careers. But then they talk about how they're not pocket. But being a pocket QB is just as overrated in my opinion, because Shedeur Sanders at Colorado this year looks more of a pocket QB than a running QB. The thing is, his pocket collapses so quickly, he gets sacked. Again, I have Shedeur stats right here because he's someone who else I want to talk about. Shedeur threw 27 TDs, 3 picks, 3,230 yards, and was sacked 52 times. And I didn't look up his rushing stats. I did, but I didn't write them down because they weren't that much of importance to me. But the Colorado offense was designed to make Shedeur look like a star. That's a whole nother conversation. So there wasn't much of a focus on the run game, and that's why he took a lot of bad sacks because he was sitting in that pocket looking to throw deep to not just Travis Hunter. Let's not forget he was out for those few couple games. Weaver, Miller, Antonio, Harrison is tight end. He had options to throw to, and a lot of his great passes came from deep throws. That's why I trust his arm talent and hope he goes to a place where he can sit a majority of the season and probably start the last 3 or 4 games of his team's out of it and show like I'm for real. I got something to prove because he does have something. He not just the Brady mode like you talked about. I'm a big fan of Shedeur by watching almost 75-80% of those Colorado games. I believe in his talent as well as his swagger because I still want a guy who's got bravado to him as a quarterback. But he was just put in a bad position because his offensive line was one of the worst in college football. But when he had the time, he was able to sit back, throw it to his guys. That's why sometimes passing attempts and all that, completions, I really don't put too much stock into attempts and completions or rating because offenses in football most of the time are designed to throw. So the amount of times you throw really doesn't matter to me because everyone wants to throw the ball. You run the ball as a last resort, or if you have no receivers, or if they got shut down corners, whatever it can be. The pocket collapses, and that was in Colorado. Deion Sanders, the coach, a big criticism on him is even if you don't have a RB1, you still got to run the ball. Running back by committee, you got to run the ball to, take some of that pressure off the quarterback to make plays. And a lot of times, Shedeur was the only one being forced to make plays because they didn't want to run the ball. And by being a pocket quarterback, you have to have something other than your running ability. And he's a decent runner. He can make big runs. That was one of the great things I saw by watching his highlights today too, is that he can make big runs. He just doesn't look to run first. And that's what I'm saying. Don't look to run first. Wait for the play to break down if you have that time. But when it moves so lightning quick, that's one of the criticisms I saw about Caleb Williams from JT O'Sullivan's QB school, is that if he's not throwing the ball right away, he thinks he's going to have all the time in the world to throw it, which he did at USC last year. But when you get to the NFL, you're not going to have all day to throw it, especially if you go to a bad team. And that's where it gets to like, all right, let this guy get comfortable in an offense, see who his weapons are. So when it's time for him to show out or show who he is, it's not, this guy's a bust, because they're already shitting on Caleb Williams for everything else. So the compare and contrast to him last year and this year. Last year, when he won the Heisman, he threw 42 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 4,537 yards, and then he rushed for 382 yards, 10 TDs. He was only sacked 30 times. And again, that's a very Heisman level season. This year, though, he only threw 30 TDs, that's 12 less, 5 interceptions, the same amount, 3,633 passing yards, so almost 900 less than the previous year. And he lost Jordan Addison, who killed the 49ers in the game I went to this year. So take that into account of he didn't have a big wide receiver target, even though he still seemed like he had weapons with Brendan Rice, Washington, and Branch. Because I watched a few USC games as well, even though I hate Southern California, LA-centric sport teams. Caleb Williams was the first USC guy I bought stock in this year. He rushed for 136 yards, so 200 less, and 11 TDs, the same amount, and sacked 33 times. So his stats are still good regardless of that. But when you watch him play, and sometimes over the course of that losing stretch, I was like, is this guy sabotaging himself? I kind of thought that about the Notre Dame game a little bit. I'm like, is this guy playing bad on purpose to like, hey, I don't look that good. Maybe I might stay in college for, that senior year. because he had that great GQ profile, which then turned into, something else with the comments after it came out. And I'll get to that in a second, but I'm just bringing up the measurables and the numbers here. Um, but the worst part about the Caleb Williams thing is that he lost 7 times against ranked opponents. You got to win at least one game against a ranked opponent. You got to show you don't beat up on bad teams. To me, that's what I was saying about Trey Lance and North Dakota State. Like, you're not facing the best competition. You're going to kind of look good regardless. But if you're a big time Heisman level contender, you got to beat a big time school. You got to beat, Utah. You got to beat, Washington. And, that's where the team sport of it gets into play, because, USC fired their defensive coordinator after the halfway point of the season because our defense was giving up as much as our offense was scoring. So that's where the team element of the sport comes into play, where it's not all on Caleb Williams. But we'll get to that in a second. Let me just take a quick drink to, So when you read the GQ profile on Caleb Williams, he's got this bravado, he's got this swagger, and I love to see it. I always root for these guys who come out the gate with swagger, and I don't want boring cookie cutter QBs. As much as I love the 49ers and I'm rooting for Brock Purdy being a man of God, just always like, this guy is just so, I want to thank the Lord first, and then my great teammates. Like, it's not that I don't like rooting for those guys. They're not my favorite, I should say. Me being not a deeply religious person, that I don't want to offend anyone, but that's just the way I'm wired. But the Caleb Williams thing was, he wins the Heisman. He's the talk of college football. And if you watch his speech, you can see why he's wired the way he is. Like, he wins the Heisman, and he looks at the other guys who are the finalists and says, as much as I'm glad I'm accepting this award, I'm disappointed I'm not playing alongside you guys in the college football playoff. Like, he's mad. He's getting not mad, but he's disappointed that the only achievement he's getting is the individual one, when he wants the gold. He wants the national title. He wants the bigger prize. And that GQ profile talks about how when he was a kid, he was a running back, and they had a big loss, and he cried afterwards, which, has been the talk of Caleb Williams, as well as his talent is his crying. And he told his dad, like, I want to play quarterback because I want to be the one to carry the burden. So if we lose, it's on me, compared to just like, oh, we lost because the quarterback didn't play well. Like, to take on that amount of pressure says something. It shows someone's wired to be competitive, to be a winner, but also a sore loser, which is why him crying after the losses isn't a big deal to me. I'm not mad that this guy cried after he lost to Utah, after he lost to Washington, because at least he showed he cares too. You don't want Jay Cutler, who doesn't give a fuck whether he threw the touchdown or the interception, not even like in a robotic way, like, I'm just doing my job. Like, you need fire and intensity. You need passion. So for him to cry, it shows, he cares about it. He cares about winning. He cares about losing. People are right to be like, is he going to cry after every loss in the NFL? Because he might have a lot of those if he goes to a bad situation, which he's more than likely to. And that's what I'm saying. Like, don't put this guy out there right away. If he's wired to be this competitive and this much of a, it's all on me, I wear my heart on my sleeve, which I, as someone who does that as well, I get it. The emotions part of it is something that's good. It's a strength as well as a weakness, in terms of people can laugh and make jokes and ha, like, this guy's crying because he lost a game. He's, his mom's having to cover his face. It's like, yeah, we would lose in that same position too. Like, I don't blame him for that. And yeah, it's the Twitter era where we got to get our jokes off as well, like cry babies and this and all that. But I mean, I'd rather a guy show some emotion after a loss as much as he shows emotion after a win. Again, you can't celebrate your touchdowns and then when it's all on you, be like, oh, I didn't make it. That's why like the guys who are flashy, we want to see them get shut up, because if you're talking shit, we want to shut you up. And that was the thing that people were trying to say back to him, is that, you know, it's you're unstoppable when you're winning, but when you lose, what's it going to be like? And that's why I'm hoping he gets to that point where he realizes like he is going to lose. This is going to be something he might have to get used to if he goes to a bad situation. And that's where the GQ profile talks about like how he wants to have, all these Super Bowls. He wants to have 8 rings because it's one more than Tom Brady has. That's when you also got to get like slow the fuck down, dude. Like, it's good to have confidence, but not that much confidence, because you're talking about this way in college. You got to forget, like, Tom Brady was put in a position multiple times to win more Super Bowls as well as lose multiple Super Bowls. It's hard to just justify like, oh yeah, it's a cool, magazine article quote, like, why do you want 8 rings? Because it's one more than Tom Brady. It's like, yeah, that's that shit where like, let's root for this guy, but also fuck this guy. He's not going to amount to anything Tom Brady did, because Tom Brady did this over the course of 20 years. You're trying to come in and do this right off the bat. It's not going to happen. But if he goes to a place like New England where Tom Brady played, he still shouldn't start regardless of Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones, like, because Bill Belichick is going to mold him in his image, where like Caleb Williams probably needs an offense tailored to him, like Lamar Jackson needed an offense tailored to him, like Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes needed an offense tailored to them. And all those guys, Lamar, Jalen, and Patrick, sat their first year, or first half of their first year. And that's the point I'm getting to, just if you're going to invest in these guys for the future, they're going to be the franchise, and you don't have any receivers, your own line shit, put someone else at the front of the battle line so they can get slaughtered, and this guy can see what it's like, what it's going to take, so he can understand, like, see why this guy is getting beaten up, because we're not a team ready yet, but we still want you to know what it's going to be like. So put him in when you're 4-10 and you only have 3 games left. That'll be the best point, so he can get those reps, feel the speed, and then know, like, my team's going to build an offense around me. And that's the toughest thing I think people get criticized for, is that, oh, so-and-so is not that good because they don't have any receivers. Every guy needs a number 1 receiver, tight end, O-lineman. They need something. Andrew Luck got beaten up for years because his team put him in these bad positions. And sure, he had T.Y. Hilton. Sure, he had, I think Quentin Nelson was his star O-lineman at the time. But it's like, it's tough if you're not going to be put in positions to succeed right away, you're going to be beaten up. Look what happened to Robert Griffin. He lit it up right away, and then injuries slowed him down. And it was a terrible thing to see, because I think we were all rooting for Robert Griffin. I loved him at Baylor, that Heisman winning season. I love what he was doing in Washington that first year. I'm like, it'll be great to see this guy do this for 10 more years. And what's he doing 10 years later? He's a commentator. He's an analyst. Look at Cam Newton now at his age. Again, look at Colin Kaepernick at his age, and that's a whole other situation. Not to compare the two, but like, as much as they have the skill to succeed right away, they also flame out as quickly. And I think that's where the other quarterbacks can mentor them in that aspect, as well as it's on the team to put them in a spot where don't feel like it's all on you, and don't abandon them halfway through. What else do I have written? Because you can see with Carolina and Bryce Young. Bryce Young, again, 5'10", short. He weighs 204, and he's 1-8 this first year. And this was a guy who won national titles, won the Heisman, and now he's gonna have to get used to losing. He's been sacked 36 times, only had 9 TDs and 8 interceptions for 1,683 passing yards going into today. And the other part of it is the size of quarterbacks. I think the way teams look at quarterbacks more than ever in the history of the game has come down to cosmetics, not just black, white, not just skin color in that aspect, but they want tall guys, powerful rocket bazooka arms. And you can see what Josh Allen, I mean, I got it right here. Josh Allen's measurables. Josh Allen's 6'6", Trevor Lawrence, 6'5". Trevor Lawrence, 6'6". Joe Burrow, 6'4". And those three guys compare to Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. Hurts is 6'1", Jackson 6'2", and Mahomes is 6'2". And yeah, those guys are picked first overall. Those guys were picked second round. Those guys were picked late first round compared to Lawrence and Burrow, who were, number one overalls, and Josh Allen, who was a mid first round pick. Teams are always going to look for the height first because they think the quarterback's got to see over the lineman, which is what they criticized Kyler Murray, which is what they criticized about Bryce Young. And this is something Caleb Williams alluded to when he said they think I was too short to play quarterback. He said that during his Heisman speech. But Brock Purdy, he's 6'2". Again, he's in that same group as Mahomes, Hurts, and Jackson. And you can see why he slid to Mr. Irrelevant, because this guy who decent college career, he started all the games. He threw this many yards, this many touchdowns, this many receptions in a real conference, the Big 12, or is it the Big 10 at that point? Well, at Iowa State. Either way, it's like this guy, we don't like his makeup. We don't like his, his physical profile, because he's not 6'4" plus with a cannon for an arm like Josh Allen, like Burrow, like Lawrence. And again, those guys are just as athletic. They're on that like tier below Hurts, Mahomes, and Lamar as athletes, but Trevor Lawrence can run the ball. Josh Allen can run the ball. Joe Burrow can run the ball when he has to. It's just not their number one option. And you can see Lamar has developed more as a passer. Jalen Hurts is trying to develop more as a passer. Pat Mahomes, I mean, he was the passer right out of the gate, but his running ability always kind of gets him beaten up with these nagging and lingering injuries he gets. But when it comes to Bryce Young and Kyler Murray, these guys who are short and we're also taking as number one overall picks, they got the deck stacked against them. Not everyone's going to be Russell Wilson, who's 5'10", wins the starting job. But when you're competing against Matt Flynn, you're going to win the starting job. That's one of the biggest finesse jobs in the history of sports, is Matt Flynn being Aaron Rodgers' backup, going to Seattle on that deal, and then losing in training camp right away to Russell Wilson. But if you saw Russell Wilson more so at Wisconsin than NC State, you knew he had something in him. And he played at Wisconsin with the biggest O-line in college football. I remember that Sports Illustrated article where they talked about how this 5'10" guy is having to look over 6'6", 6'7", 6'5" guys who are, brick shit houses protecting him. But that's what I mean. They built an offense for him in college, and that's how all these guys succeed. And it comes down to, how are they going to succeed at the next level? I rewatched it the other day, the Merrill Hodge video where he broke down why Johnny Manziel wasn't going to succeed. And that's not counting off the field stuff, because that's the other thing that will take guys out. He plays his football. He doesn't play the team football. He's going to play Johnny Manziel football in the pros, and that's why he's not going to succeed. And his height, his weight, all of it, it's not going to translate well if he's not going to play how the team's supposed to play. And it didn't. And anyone who watched the Johnny football doc, he says it now with hindsight, being like, yeah, I wasn't ready to play for it. I didn't, watch film. I didn't practice, team football. I just went out there and played because he was a baller. He was an NBA player as a football player. Like, I'm going to go out there and play ISO quarterback. Like, no, you got to play within the system. That's why Brock Purdy looks so good. He plays in the Shanahan system. But then you get those little chances to show, like, no, I'm a guy who can also, freestyle. I can do the Willie Beeman, steaming beaming. Like, I'm going to change the play, or if the play breaks, now I can show y'all what I can do. It's not just a system. It's the guy within the system. And that's always the thing where, to speak on it as a whole, I think the black quarterbacks have the unfair burden of trying to be more than just runners, because it's always bullshit when they force these guys to be receivers like they wanted Lamar to, or that Jalen Hurts can only be a runner. It's like, no, give them the time to develop the passing game. Even Pat Mahomes said it after the Super Bowl he won. He was like, I'm just now learning how to fully read NFL defenses. It takes time. Is that because he's not putting that much work into the film room? I doubt it. He's Pat Mahomes. I haven't watched that NFL, that Netflix quarterback docuseries, but I bet his training regimen is film work these days because you have to know what you're playing against. And he knows his receivers this year aren't as good as the receivers he's had in the past. So he's got to rely more on what he's going up against than what he's playing with. And that's probably what's going to be the downfall of Caleb Williams and Shador once they transition from college to the pros is who are you playing with? If you're not playing with anyone good right away, you're going to be bludgeoned, beaten up, and then looked at as a bust. And then everyone's going to be like, see, Caleb Williams was wrong to ask for that ownership like he did, which was crazy as fuck. I still don't feel like that's a true story. It was just something to add more fuel to the fire of like, get a load of this guy, his bravado, his arrogance, the belief in himself as well. But someone also is going to ask for that at some point. He's going to, and it's not wrong for him to be the first. We can see it in certain times where maybe LeBron James should have had a stake in Cleveland while he was playing there both times. Because if you're going to mean this much to the team, if you're the reason we are in the playoffs with George Hill and J.R. Smith and all these guys as your supporting cast, once Kyrie was gone, it's like, maybe we owe you a little extra. Maybe we owe you actual part of the team because you are the part of the team. And the NFL obviously isn't going to be wired that way because it's the richest sport in America. And they're not going to give a single person, no matter who they are, that kind of stake while they're playing. So that story I thought was ridiculous from the start, but it was just fuel to the fire because he already said he was going to mull his options at the end of this college season because he has that power. He can return to a senior season if he wants and hope a better team can take him. But I think he knows coming back would also hurt his stock more based on how USC finished. And him declining to speak to the media was the student part of being a student athlete, is what I should say. Because as much as they want to knock him for not speaking to the media, you still want to treat these guys like they're college kids, regardless of the NIL that they have to, go to class, regardless of the Angel Reese story, which I didn't do too much deep diving into. But Caleb Williams is still a student at USC just because he's getting paid by Dr. Pepper, by Wendy's. He still has to go to his classes regardless. So he can decline to speak to the media because it's not a requirement like it is at the professional level to speak to the media. So I was on his side with that. I'm trying to think is there anything else I wanted to say because I can't really think of much else at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I'm always rooting for black quarterbacks to succeed. I know going into week 1 this year had the most. Anthony Richardson was one of those guys, and I don't pay attention to really other teams outside of my own being the 49ers, but they made him team captain, and they put all the stock into a guy who, again, was probably too raw athletically, and then he gets injured because, again, he's maybe his style of being a runner and being a physical guy, and the hits he took, like he had the concussion in the second game, and then the shoulder surgery. It's like, again, they put him out there and he got slaughtered. If you have, again, Gardner Minshew is now the starting QB for Indianapolis. Let him start the first 8 games. You can go 3-5 with Gardner Minshew, 4-4, and then Anthony Richardson can come in and show you what he's got after sitting and taking time to understand the playbook and the offense. Preseason and training camp's not enough for these guys, in my opinion. It's just not enough, especially when you only are 60% of what they want you to be, like Anthony Richardson's supposed to be. And a lot of people, like he's supposed to be the next Lamar, the next Cam, based off his tools. Don't do that to him right away. Come on. Especially, I think he was only really starting the last year, whereas Cam Newton, just like Cam Newton did at Auburn compared to his years at Florida, but still, don't do this because of that. There is one success story. I always try to be as even-sided as possible when it comes to that. For every, like I said, Bryce Young, there is a Russell Wilson. So don't count out the short quarterbacks because they can succeed. For every Mike Vick, there is the second act of Mike Vick, where you're a runner first, passer second. You're a passer first, runner second. The dynamic can flip, but you just got to know within yourself, what do you want to do? And I think, to go back to the Trey Lance point, they picked Trey Lance to sit behind Jimmy and then to be the future. The Niners, when they picked Kaepernick, I wasn't fully sure if they picked him knowing he was going to be the future. I know going into that senior year of college for him that he was looked at as like a guy to watch for. I wasn't watching about it, but I remember I had that Sports Illustrated where they showed he was on pace to be the first 10,000 yard passing, 4,000 yard rushing guy. And I'm like, oh, I'm getting it. This guy's pretty interesting. And then when the Niners picked him, I'm like, oh, they picked that guy. I remember reading about him. And he sat that entire first year, and he only ran a few plays during the middle of the season. And Alex Smith took the Niners to the NFC title game. They lose to the Giants next year. Colin Kaepernick's still a backup, but he's, been working out the offense the whole time as a backup. And when Alex Smith goes down, he has that start against the Bears and shows them what he's capable of doing. And most importantly, Jim Harbaugh knew what he had, and he built the pistol offense into the system for him to succeed in. Read options, QB handoffs, all of that, where it wasn't the same style that they wanted to play of Alex Smith. They played to the strengths of Kaepernick, and that's why they went to the Super Bowl, and it's why they went to the NFC title game the next year, regardless if he dropped off after that, because injuries happen. But Harbaugh believed in the ability that he had and played to his ability, and you can see that with Lamar the first year at the end where he was playing in the Joe Flacco system. The next year they switched the system to benefit him more, and he wins the MVP. And you can see that with Jalen Hurts in his season last year. And Mahomes, once it was his time to shine, he played the system that Andy Reid had built for him. So my point is, at the end of the day, is if you're going to draft these guys high first round picks, and you already know like your team isn't fully ready to compete within a 2-year window, and this guy's earliest years, don't put them out there to get beaten up. Again, like I said, CJ Stroud is the guy breaking what I'm talking about. But he has a good coordinator in Bobby Slowick, who was the 49ers offensive coordinator. And D'Amico Ryans is a good coach. I knew he'd be a good coach when he was a 49ers defensive coordinator the last 2 years. And they were put in that position to make this guy, like, let's not waste this guy. Let's do something with this guy. And his measurables too are 6'2", 2 something. And he doesn't have too many weapons in terms of what Brock Purdy has. He's doing a decent job like Brock Purdy's doing in terms of like good passing stats, QBR, all of that. My point at the end of the day is I'm always going to believe in the black quarterbacks to succeed because they got that extra bit of skill compared to Kenny Pickett, compared to, Derek Carr, all these other, like Derek Carr, he's going to dink and dunk when he has Chris Olave or Michael Thomas or whoever else he has. I don't familiarize myself with the Saints too much, but you know what I mean? We're like, if their offense is, if I can't throw it deep, I'm going to throw it short. And that was one of the criticisms Caleb Williams had based off JT O'Sullivan's QB score. He's throwing it to the right, to the left, right away with those bubble screens and then those quick routes. But then when he's got time, he can make a big play happen. He can, do his Mahomes impersonation where he's running around, he's spinning around, and he chucks the ball deep and the receivers catch it. In the NFL, that's going to be reduced to a minimum because those pockets collapse a lot faster. But if you can still make throws on the run, you can make throws on the run. It's just, your maneuverability and all that. Your mobility. I don't think maneuverability is a word, but you know what I mean. But I believe in Caleb Williams to an extent. I bought stock in his story because I liked that GQ profile. I believe in Shedeur Sanders. Like I said, he's probably the one who needs to sit more so he can succeed later. But yeah, it's that thing where, like I said, it's not coded language where I'm just like start the white guys, sit the black guys, because I'm not trying to say that at all, because you can see it was great that Brock Purdy sat. If he had gotten drafted higher than where he was, and maybe went to a team that saw more potential in him than others did and started, maybe he wouldn't be so good right away. And you can see right now, Josh Allen's kind of shown like, oh yeah, this guy who threw picks early in his career kind of still throws picks. Um, you know, it sounded like Trevor Lawrence took some time to show he was the guy from college. Joe Burrow got injured his first year, and he's injured in this season. But in those 2 seasons in between, he went to the AFC title game both times. So there are, outliers, or they're, you got to look at the full side of the story sometimes too. But, look at Will Levis in Tennessee. Look at the other guys taken in the past 3 drafts. Again, like Zach Wilson's the biggest one, or Zach Wilson should have sat. He should have not started at all because he wasn't ready. Just like Justin Fields should have sat. He wasn't ready because the one thing he's developed is bad habits because he's on a bad team. And if he probably went to a new team, he would be able to show, I got talent. I just, I need more. And he had those comments where the system is making him play a certain way, and that's why he's not looking good. But if he's right, if he's not feeling comfortable in the system, then that maybe they need a new system. Because that's all the NFL is at the end of the day, is a system for players. As much as James Harden in basketball talk about how he is a system, he's right in that way. Basketball, you can dominate much more as an individual with the guys around you. With football, Giselle said about Tom Brady, where like he can only throw the ball, he can't catch the ball too. So if you don't have receivers, you don't have linemen blocking for you, you're gonna be shit out of luck. So Caleb Williams is probably still gonna be picked number 1 overall. He's probably still gonna start right away, and we'll just wait and see how that turns out. It'll suck because I always hate seeing, like I said, guys that kill it on Saturday be torn apart on Sunday, and that happens time and time again. It's just always been the saddest thing for me because you love rooting for these guys in college and know most of the time they aren't going to work out. I mean, Tim Tebow, say as much as I'm a huge Tebow fan for what he was doing in college and the NFL, like he played ugly football, but he still won games. That's what matters. Are you winning games? Yeah. How are you winning games? Well, not how we imagine, not how football should be played, but hey, a win's still a win. And on any given Sunday, anything can happen. And that's what I love about Any Given Sunday and its realistic depiction of football. As much as over the top it is, it's still very accurate with the Jamie Foxx, Willie Beeman, Steamin' Willie Beeman character, and the way the media treats players. Again, that whole thing is accurate to this day, where he talks about being a black quarterback, and when Al Pacino says to him, like, you're a goddamn quarterback. You know what that means? It's the top spot. It's the guy who takes the fall. So when you're a guy who has to take the fall for playing bad because the whole team's bad, that's going to fuck with these guys. And you can see it. I think it's fucking with Justin Fields. It's definitely fucking with Zach Wilson. And we'll see if they'll be able to rebound from this and show that they still got some more offer. But what happens every year, time and time again, guys can watch out. A new crop comes in, a new class, and positions are not guaranteed. Tom Brady thought he was going to be the Patriots QB forever, and then Jimmy Garoppolo showed something, and then he was kind of like, hey, now this is my job. You got to get rid of that guy. And then they got rid of him. So there's that level of competition to it as well, where if a guy can look just as good as you, you got to play politics at the end of the day. But thank you all for tuning in. Yeah, I don't know what else to say really. I don't know how often I'm going to be doing this. I just wanted to say this because, like I said, Double G and Rod had brought up this conversation on their podcast, and I didn't want to type a string of tweets, or it's in a Discord as well. I didn't want to type a full page of my response and do all this and all that, because I've gone an hour. I'm shocked I've talked this long by myself, but I'm not too surprised either, knowing that I can be a motor mouth when I need to. But it's almost been an hour. Thank y'all. Like I said, I don't know how long I'm going to keep doing this, or the frequency at which I'll be doing this, but appreciate y'all tuning in. And yeah, peace.